Runes used to be some of RuneScape's rarest items, near impossible to come across, but extremely powerful. This is the story of how RuneScape's rune shortage was solved, and how the solution came to be the game's most hated activity. First of all, I have to give a big thank you to Cook from the RuneScape wiki for supplying most of the information I'm about to discuss. So let's take it all the way back to RuneScape Classic. Just like today, in old school RuneScape, Classic had three combat styles: attack, magic, and ranged. But the idea of the combat triangle didn't exist yet. For those that haven't heard of it, think of it as a slightly more complicated game of rock, paper, scissors. Melee beats range, range beats magic, and magic beats melee. So, as an example, if you're trying to kill someone wearing melee gear, you'd want to attack with magic, as it will typically hit the most consistently on them. Back in Classic, it was sort of just up to developers to make whatever they wanted. There was no triangle to follow. So we got some insanely broken stuff. Most broken of all would be the dwarf multi-cannon. Ranged itself was very weak, but the cannon was the only weapon in the game that allowed you to attack multiple monsters at the same time. And it was ridiculously strong, even stronger than today's cannon. As for one-on-one combat, magic was king. This is because in September of 2003, the Mage Arena quest was added to the game. Completing it would unlock the God spells, which were so strong, they would almost double your damage per second. You'd think that with magic being number one, everyone would want to use it, but almost nobody did. It wasn't that players preferred melee, which was very strong too, it was that they couldn't afford to train magic. At the time, runes were beyond difficult to come across. The only place they were readily accessible was rune shops, but they only sold the most basic low-level runes. You could get the higher tier runes as a rare drop, but that's rare. You could get them from item spawns around the world, but those were camped and highly competitive. The only place you could consistently get runes like nature runes and blood runes was by thieving chests, which would net you around 100 per hour of whichever one you were chasing. You know how the Monk's Friend quest gives 8 law runes whenever you complete it? Probably not, because that's a near worthless reward. Well, back in Classic, getting those 8 law runes felt like being the quarterback of the gnome ball team. The only way to get laws otherwise was from monsters, which again, didn't drop them very frequently. As you can imagine, all this led to a large number of bots camping monsters who dropped the most runes. But even that wouldn't fix the shortage. Pretty ironic that a game called RuneScape had a rune shortage. Now, you might be sitting here listening to all this and thinking, that sounds okay, because magic is obviously a pretty powerful skill. It can send you around the globe faster than Elon's jet, inflict the strongest attacks in the game, turn items into gold, and much more. Having it be costly and tedious to gather runes could offset it being so good. Except, you have to remember that this is RuneScape Classic, where just about everything, even the easiest skills, were already difficult. You can slip and fail to chop a tree, fail to light a fire, and in magic, a spell can fizzle. When a spell fizzles, it doesn't cast, and locks you out of using it for another 20 seconds. It doesn't use any runes, but it's beyond annoying, especially if you're trying to grind out some levels. We're just getting started though. Today in RuneScape, you can auto-cast spells with staffs. Just equip a staff, select the spell, click a monster, and your character will cast that spell over and over again until the monster dies or your character runs out of runes. Yeah, that didn't exist in Classic. You had to manually cast every single spell. But it gets worse. Magic was something you did sort of in between melee hits. That sounds confusing, and it sort of is. Basically, if I attack a monster, no matter what, I have to fight it with melee unless it's safe spotted. I can still cast spells while attacking with melee, but it's weird. It's sort of something you do in between attacks. Unlike RuneScape 2, melee gear didn't lower your magic stats. So this is why in a lot of these clips, you see a lot of players players who use magic just wearing melee gear. Some argue that this type of combat is more interesting than RuneScape 2's, and I kind of agree, but 10-year-old me definitely would not have been able to figure it out. Magic was tedious, costly, and rage-inducing, so some players had no interest in training it to higher levels despite its massive benefits. It's really no wonder that the Gowers thought nobody would ever get 99 in any skill. So, rewinding a bit, Majorino released just a few months before the game would transition over to RuneScape 2. Besides just upgrading the graphics, the team wanted to make a lot of changes to the game. So many more than I could mention in this one video, so leave a like if you want to see a video about some of the more ridiculous ones. The one I'll be discussing today was to make magic less tedious of a skill and make runes more widely available. So one day, Andrew Gower came into the content team area of Jagex's offices and said that he'd like to make 3 changes to magic in RuneScape 2. 1. Change the XP rates for magic to be higher. 2. Double everyone's runes when their saves were converted from Classic to RuneScape 2. And 3. Make a new skill that would allow players to make their own runes. Number 3 was passed off to Mod James, and a pretty tight deadline was set. The skill needed to be ready by RuneScape 2's launch. Not just the launch of the full game either, it needed to be ready by the launch of its beta. Craziest of all, this was Mod James's first skill, and his second ever piece of content. Even so, he got it done. The day the beta launched, players noticed a new skill called Runecraft. Yes, it's actually called Runecraft, not Runecrafting. For some reason, everyone adds the ing to the end, including me. Anyway, Runecraft was genius because it was a skill that fixed a major problem with the economy. Large amounts of runes could now be obtained by players, and they had new content to keep them playing for longer. Even players who didn't train Runecraft had something new to do. So the normal way runes were crafted was by taking rune essence to an altar, clicking on it, returning to a bank to get more essence, and repeating. However, players quickly found a way to rapidly increase their XP and GP per hour with the help of others. You could pay other players, typically in runes, to bring you essence while you just sat at the altar making runes over and over again. But not everything about Runecraft was awesome. It had a bit of a problem. It was a skill designed mainly to fix the rune shortage, and not as much thought went into the other stuff. Virtually every rune was crafted the exact same way. Bring essence to altar, craft, bank, repeat. Sure, you'd have to travel to different altars, some ridiculously far away, but you're more or less doing the same thing over and over all the way to 99. The experience rates were abysmal too. They were so bad, it made runecrafting RuneScape's slowest skill to train. While trying to find more exact numbers, I found a guide that said the highest experience per hour was 15,000, and that was using a method not even available until 2 months after the skill released. Albeit players weren't as efficient back then as they are today, but still. It just goes to show that the average player was barely progressing this skill. On the bright side, runecrafting offered some ridiculous profit, but that was usually not until the later levels. So as a result of all this, now instead of players not wanting to train magic, they didn't want to train runecrafting. Jagex tried to remedy this by releasing some tweaks to the skill in 2005, such as allowing players to craft tiaras that would allow them to enter altars without wasting an inventory slot on a talisman. They also introduced combination runes that, well, it's in their name. They were a combination of other runes. And they also added the Abyss, a location that didn't need talismans or tiaras and would house teleports to every altar in the game. But you'd have to travel through the wilderness to reach it, and you'd be skulled. What makes the Abyss even cooler though is the creatures inside it would drop essence pouches that would over double the amount of essence you could carry per trip. The Abyss, pouches, and combination runes improved XP rates a ton, and we saw a lot more players starting to train the skill for something other than profit. Although the Abyss definitely improved profit too. But yet another problem was on the rise. Rune Essence, the item you turn into runes when crafting them, was incredibly easy to obtain and valuable. You could start a new account, complete the Rune Mysteries quest, and start mining Rune Essence all in under an hour. Although the method would only earn around around 40 to 50,000 GP an hour, which actually wasn't too terrible at the time, it didn't require membership to train. So it was incredibly easy for a bot farm owner to take advantage of this and make millions per day. At one point, it got so bad, Jagex said they were banning hundreds of these bots every day. So Jagex decided to lock members' runes behind a new item called Pure Essence. You'd mine it in the same place as Rune Essence, but only members could receive it. This would decrease the demand for Rune Essence, thus making it harder for those free-to-play bots to profit. The skill overall was much better than launch, accomplished what it set out to do, and although it still didn't have the most fun gameplay, that would later be fixed with the Guardians of the Rift minigame. And if you're still one of those people who hate runecrafting and wish it wasn't a skill, at least you don't need to pay 3,000 GP per blood rune anymore. Another piece of content that has changed a lot since release is Zaya. It was originally considered a total failure, and I made a whole video about why on the right hand side of the screen.